Welcome back to the Nearly Enlightened podcast. I am your host, Giana Girusso. Today, I am joined by a good friend, Kevin Wathey. He is a peak performance and mindset coach, an international retreat leader, and serial entrepreneur. Unlike most who begin a profitable career only to have a moment of doubt send them down a path of self-discovery, Wathey was sent down a path of self-discovery that led him to creating a profitable career, helping others do the same and find fulfillment in the process. Having suffered the devastating loss of his mother when he was just 17, he has devoted his life to answering a profound question: in what capacity or to what extent do we control our destiny? He founded Synchronicity Group in 2017, which is now a multi-divisional organization with a singular mission: to help entrepreneurs to become their best so that their business can become its best. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm stoked to be here, and I know this is long overdue.
Yes, it totally is, but it's perfect timing. I'm so excited to have you on because my past guests have been predominantly female, so we've had a lot of feminine energy. So it's nice to get a masculine.
I'll mix it up a bit today.
Yeah, to have that balance of masculine energy. It's really nice. So thank you for being on.
Thank you for having me.
So let's get right to it. So something I ask everyone is, what is your hot take or unpopular opinion? And you kind of reframed this, which I liked. So I'll have you talk to everyone about it. But what's your hot take and unpopular opinion?
Because I know that we had talked about this a while ago. Is there something you're driving me towards, or you want to say the first thing that came to mind right now?
There's two things that you wrote here, and one of them I've actually talked about on the podcast a lot lately, and it's a journey that I'm kind of going through as well, to kind of take the focus off of alcohol and like not have alcohol, and like I like to call it sober curious. And this was a big one for me because it's kind of like I feel it's kind of like a programming that we have in our society, and not drinking alcohol, I feel so much better. And recently I just had my boyfriend's sister was here and we had 2 drinks with her, and I was like so unwell for like 3 days after just 2 drinks. And I'm wondering for you, how has that shifted your focus?
100%. So I'm glad that I asked the question. Otherwise, I was going to steer it on a way different tangent with the first thing that just came to mind right there. But so alcohol has I've had an interesting relationship with alcohol in my life, and going back, one of the things that I've uncovered, and one of the reasons why, is that one of the things that I always wanted to do was have a beer with my mom on my 21st birthday.
Aww.
And we had talked about that growing up, like when you turn 21 and we'll go grab a beer kind of thing. And because I never got to have that experience, what I did get to have is when we knew that there were like days left before she passed, she told my dad, like, hey, go to the store, get a couple beers, and he can sit on the bed with me and have a beer. And like, I was 17 and
oh my God, you're going to make me cry.
I had a beer with her. But the thing is, I don't want to say I attributed alcohol to a connection with her, but I attributed alcohol to a numbing of what I felt inside rather than allowing myself to experience. Because after she passed, I turned towards drugs and alcohol to make myself feel nothing. And that initially, and even to this day, I still don't have the greatest relationship with alcohol. I know that full well. So I'm very conscious of like, hey, if I'm going to go out and drink, it's very few and far between, maybe once or twice a year, if that. But I know the implications that come with it. And I mean, through college, growing up playing hockey, then through college, and then through acting, like alcohol was always part of the conversation, and it was always a prerequisite to doing something. So it was always like, okay, we're going here. Where are we going to pregame first? Or we're going here. How fucked up are we going to be before we get to this place? And it was always like experience in and of itself was an afterthought. Drinking was the primary thought. And it was detracting from what I was experiencing in my life. Fast forward after, I got 19 and 21. I got 2 DUIs.
Whoa.
One of them was 100% a DUI. I was driving. The other one, I was sleeping in my car, and I had the keys in the ignition because it was June in Arizona, and it was 6 a.m, and it was like 100 degrees. So I had intent. So there was that.
So
There was
would you
all
say
of
that was like your come to Jesus moment kind of, or did
no.
it even?
It was years after that. That was I brushed it off as like, oh, it's a lesson kind of thing, and there was a lot that I had to go through because of that, but it was a blessing in and of itself. There was always these like, wow, I probably should slow down or not drink moments in my life after going to like we're like going on a bender or something and then coming back and being like, I feel horrible for the next week. Why would I do that? And just mentally not being in the right headspace. But contrary to what people think, there was never like I'm not drinking ever again, come to Jesus moment. There was I want to try this fitness challenge. It was called the 75 Hard, Andy Frisella's challenge. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do 90 days. So it was 90 days, no alcohol. I used to chew tobacco because of hockey, no tobacco, a gallon of water a day, 2 workouts, 1 indoor, 1 outdoor. I think that was it. There was something else to it too. And I did that for 90 days, and I felt so good at the end of 90 days. I just continued. Like I continued that for almost 18 months.
Whoa.
And not to the same, the no drinking piece, I continued. The 2 workouts a day here and there. But I think the biggest piece in all of that was I needed to give myself permission to feel. I need to give myself permission to feel great. Like it's okay to feel really fucking good every single day. And I almost looked at that and felt that was like I needed to lower my energetic output to match those that were around me. And then what I realized is I just needed to change the people that were around me.
Yeah. Wow, that's super powerful and something I think a lot of people can relate to. Myself, like 2020, 2021 were like the best years of my life. And I too had like that guilt of like, no one around me feels good right now. Like everyone is depressed, angry, and like all of these things. And I really felt bad about feeling great. So I withdrew a lot and like wouldn't talk about it. But those were like the best the best years of my life. So I can totally relate to that feeling of like almost feeling guilty for feeling so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was I would see people around me who were always complaining, and I was always finding the blessing in everything. And I think part of that is because of my relationship with death. And I say that in the most humble sense because I experienced not just my mom, but my best friend and multiple other experiences over the past decade of my life that I recognize that the only constant we have in life is death. Like that's the only thing that's guaranteed to us. You can say death, taxes, and whatever. Taxes aren't even guaranteed depending on where you live. So death is literally
or depending on your status, but that's another story.
This is true. If you know how to play the game. So death being the only constant, if that's the case, why am I fearing it? Because if it's something that's a guaranteed, it's like when it happens, great. Don't do something just stupid. But I also I believe in the sense that things are predetermined in a way where you have a choose your own adventure path. And depending on the choices that you make today depends on where that end point is. And in doing so, it's like, if it's meant to happen based on the choices I'm making right now, then it's meant to happen. And I've come to terms with that. It's okay. I've experienced a lot of it. And because of that, I realized that I'm okay even when it happens. And it's like, it's an interesting thing to say. And this, I don't want to get taken the wrong way, but I'll explain it too. It's like losing my mom was one of the worst things, but also one of the best things that's ever happened to me. Because I wouldn't be half of the person that I am today if I hadn't gone through that experience. And to give kind of the quick backstory on that and how a lot of what I do is now mindset based. She She ran a triathlon in 2009, had low back pain, ran the Tempe Town Lake Triathlon, had low back pain, thought she hurt herself in the race, got an MRI, stage 4 pancreatic. They gave her 3 months to live. January 2010, she sat my sister and I down and said she was going to spend one more Christmas with us. Passed away December 26th. Outlived the prognosis by a year and literally chose the date of her last breath. If she's capable of doing that, what else is this, our mind, capable of that we don't give it credit for? And so this was a revelation. Literally, today's January 26th. So a month ago today, I had this revelation that every year up until this past year, I viewed the 26th as the anniversary of her passing. This past year, I viewed it as the anniversary of her giving me the greatest blessing that she could have ever done. And that's showing me through example that our mind is more powerful than anything else in our lives.
Wow, I have the goosebumps.
That's the shift.
I'm very connected to spirit, and I also had an experience with death at a young age. My brother passed away when I was 8. So death has been it was framed different growing up for me. And my uncle was also a funeral director. So like we talked about death all the time. And it is one of those things that I think that we use alcohol to kind of numb those feelings, because it's a scary thing to think about. Like when we think about a loved one's mortality, it also brings up our own mortality. And that's very scary for people. Like death is a thing that we don't want to talk about. We don't want to look at it. It's like one of those ugly human things that we push away. But I agree. Like for a long time, it hurt to talk about my brother, to, anything around that. But I also view it as a blessing. And now I have a very strong relationship with him, even though he is passed, he's crossed over to the other side. And I don't know if that's true for you too, but.
Yeah, no, there was an interesting experience that I had a couple days ago too, where I can tie it into this, where previously my pattern would be to suppress the emotion or to suppress the feeling rather than allow myself to experience it, which then just like presses things down. And when I first discovered yoga, the reason yoga had such a profound impact on me is because I never grieved my mom's passing. 5 years later, when I discovered yoga, I came out of a class and the sky was bluer, the trees were greener, like I could smell differently. And then I was in Asia and I made eye contact with my vocal production coach at the time, saw my mom and her, and was collapsed to the floor and was incomprehensible the rest of that day because I never allowed myself to process that emotion. I had some stuff the other day come up for me that in the past, and I recognized it in the moment, I was like, in the past, this is what I would feel like when I was like, I'm going to go to the bar. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do 10 minutes of breath work. And I literally laid on my bed, and I've never done this before. I've never used breath work as a vehicle before in the past. I've always used exercise or meditation or yoga, or never breath work.
But it is another way to move energy. So
correct. And this was the most profound experience laying on the bed behind me. 10 minutes. I did 2 rounds of holotropic breath work and just like a 2-part breath, belly, chest, exhale. First round, I was screaming. Second round, I was crying. I came out of that second round and I was a new person. I was like, this is what it's like to actually release something rather than hold on to it.
Yeah.
And it's something that I have all the tools. I know I have all the tools. In the moment, do we choose to use them? Not always. But what's fascinating, and I've always remembered this. So when I used to act professionally, I went and did it's called Fitzmaurice breath work. It's vocal production. So it's for like how to speak and breathe properly. I was in Bogota, Colombia, training and performing at a Fitzmaurice conference. And one of the instructors related breath work to, they took it back to like an animal community and how animals use breath work themselves. And they said, they pulled up a video and they showed a lion hunting. And the lion, all the muscles in its body, super tense, catches the animal before it kills the animal, before it consumes the animal, it roars. Why? Because it releases all of the tension that it built up while it was pursuing the chase. But when was the last time you saw a human roar? Or when was the last time you saw want like us release things rather than carry this excess baggage with us. We do the complete opposite, and then it compounds and compounds and compounds and compounds. And by the
Yes.
time it gets to the place where you have to release it, it's gotten to an uncontrollable place, and now you're out of control. You're not empowered, you're disempowered now.
And I would say that our society today would say, oh, especially in the new age kind of spiritual community, it's like, oh, you need to integrate those pieces of yourself. And I could not disagree more. Like, no, we should not be integrating those shadow pieces of ourselves, because a lot of that is programmed. It's not even from us. So now we're integrating pieces that aren't even of ourselves. It's not authentic.
I agree. I don't think integrate is the right word. I think accepting of is maybe the better word, because something that I was just in Miami with Jordan Peterson last week, and something interesting came up, and it was essentially, it's not the embodiment of the shadow that gives you the ability to reach peak performance. It's the acceptance of it. So that I know that in my past, I really enjoyed partying and I really enjoyed those environments. It's not me now shutting that out and saying that's not me anymore. That will always be part of me because I enjoy that. I just need to accept that, recognize it's not the smartest move, and recognize the implications of it happening in my life. What if I do that? Here's the actions and the results that come from the inputs that I'm doing. Recognize and accept that that's a choice. Obviously, it's not going to be something that I want to do regularly because it's not going to propel me towards where I want to go. But if I accept that piece of me, now it's this, I'm complete in a sense, rather than feeling like I have to pretend that that didn't exist. And that was a big piece for me.
That's so interesting. That's an interesting way of framing it. So how did you, so you've reached, even in the past couple years, you've reached certain obstacles that you've created into opportunities. So how did mindset play a part in that?
I think mindset is the game. mindset is everything in and of itself. And it's not, so you always hear people talk about like, change your mindset, change your life kind of thing. And you're like, okay, what the fuck does that actually mean?
And like, how?
Yeah. I think what most people fail to recognize is that the vast majority of the problems that they have in their life are perceptions. Problems are nothing more than pressure that we must push against to help us craft our character. So if you think of problems as blessings, they become things that you seek out, because it's not, to take a Tony Robbins quote, it's not about the resources that you have, it's about the resourcefulness that you have. So if we look at problems and obstacles turning into opportunities, if you recognize an obstacle, rather than pushing through it, what if we zoomed out for a second? And if you zoom out from that obstacle or that problem, the vast majority of the time, the problem solves itself because you look at it in a different way. And the only reason it's a problem is because you're assuming and attaching to an outcome must be this way. But what if it's presented itself for you to, all right, time to pivot, time to take a tangent? And I think that's been one of the biggest blessings in my life, or one of the things I attribute a lot of my success to is A, curiosity, and B, the willingness to pivot no matter what happened before. It's not like I've done all this work that got me to this point, can't throw that away because that's not, no, that work got you to where you are now. And now you're prepared to pivot towards what you want to do. The only constant, it's going back, we have death, but it's change. So now if we're changing things consistently, you just need to stay in alignment with what it is that you feel is right in that moment. Not saying this is the goal I set out to accomplish 6 months ago. Doesn't feel right. Let's pivot. This is where I want to be. Let's pivot. I had a great example for me is I wanted to build a business, not because I wanted to build a business, but I realized it was because I wanted to feel important. So I built a team of 12 people, was doing the job of 8 of them. I was actually talking to one of my ex-employees just before this. And in January of 2022, I let 8 of them go. And then we had 4, moved 2 of them to contractors, and then 1 of them stayed full time. And then I recognized that I didn't even need that, because I pivoted how I looked at the business. And what I actually wanted was not to be on calls 40 hours a week, to be managing people and to be doing all of these things. That's what I was conditioned, in a sense. It was how I perceived what success was at the time. And now I view it very, very differently.
Yeah. What's your definition of success?
Always striving for growth without sacrificing the present.
I feel like we need to take a minute so we can all just like take that in. So something else that you wrote here that it kind of like piqued my interest was you wrote the real reason why your life doesn't look like you want it to. And that was it. That's all you put. So it was like, oh, we have to talk about this.
It's the real reason most people don't have the life they want to is because they don't take the actions they know they must. We all know we must do. We all know what we have to do. Most of us just choose not to. That's as simple as you can get. You, in your heart, know if this is a right or wrong choice. It's purely subjective. There is no good and bad. That's subjective based on the individual. But you know what is going to move you towards what you want, and you know what is going to move you away from it. Everyone does. And if they don't, they're a psychopath.
Or they are vastly out of touch.
Could be.
With themselves.
Could be. Yeah. With that knowledge, though, I think it's fear of consequence. I think the whole reason people don't make the decisions that they want is not because they know like they know right and wrong. They know what they should do, what they shouldn't do. But I think the reason they don't is because they fear the consequences of the people that they surround themselves with. Because it's like, we don't not go rob a store because it's wrong. We don't rob a store because we know the consequences of what will happen to us if we do. Like it's the fear that prevents us from doing things. So if you surround yourself with people who aren't helping you grow and aren't propelling you and holding you to a higher standard than you are holding yourself to, what you're doing is you're allowing other people to dictate the actions you make based and rooted in fear. Because you're saying that if I stop drinking, well, I'm not going to be friends with these people because everything we do revolves around drinking. Great. They're not the right people to be in your life right now. You've outgrown them. Like, it's that uncertainty point. It's that unknown of, okay, well, if I don't hang out with these people, what am I going to do? Well, I've been there. You fucking hang out with yourself and you fall in love with yourself. And then you find people and align with people who are in alignment with where you want to go. That's one of the reasons I have like found LA home recently, is because of the people that I've surrounded myself with. Like, home is not a place, it's the people.
Yes. Oh my God. I completely agree with that. Like, I mean, I moved here from the East Coast and I split my time between here in Arizona and in Colorado. And like, I consider all 3 of these places my home. And people find that so bizarre, but it's like these feelings that we get and the people that we're around. And like, it's not just this place that we're like from or we were born in. So I agree with that. Home is wherever you make it.
Mm-hmm. That was a huge lesson I got out of this last trip when I was in Africa and Europe the past couple months. And travel's not always all unicorns and rainbows like people make it out to be. And I was on the road for over 3 months solo, and the first 45 days, impeccable, incredible. But then it came to this point in the middle where I was by myself. I had been by myself for a month and a half. I knew I had another month at minimum to go. And it wasn't like I was going to just go home. So the thing was, all these emotions came up where it was almost giving me a challenge. It was an obstacle that I was able to expand into. And by expanding into it, increased my capacity for allowing myself to feel and be comfortable with who I am by myself. And in doing so, I feel, not that I didn't before, but I feel much more complete presently solo than I often do around other people. And I made an intention to go deeper with the people I already know rather than trying to meet new and more people. And that's been the opposite in my whole life. It's been like, who do I not know that I should? And now it's, who do I know that I should go deeper with?
What's that experience like?
In what sense?
Like, I guess like what do you notice that's like at the surface level that you feel you need to go deeper, or for any person who's in relationship with anyone, how do you know that like you're only at a surface level and you need to go deeper?
Well, I don't allow myself to have surface level conversations. I ask people, I go very deep with, like, ask anyone who's like just met me. They're like, wow, I just had a 30-minute conversation with Kevin and like, he knows my entire story. Like I ask, because I'm not afraid to ask hard questions. I go very deep with people very quickly. So we get to that first step or that first milestone where I go deeper than most, where it's not, how's the weather? What'd you do today? It's no like, what gets you up in the morning and why are you doing what you do? Like anytime I have a connection call, even in business, I don't even ask them what they do. I ask like, I want to know about the why behind the who and who the fuck are you? Like, and people are like, whoa, I've never been asked that before. I'm like, yeah, because most people don't give a shit, but I actually care about who you are and why, because I don't want to work with someone who we're not aligned with. Like, it's not about the whole cliche. It's like not about the money, but really it's not. Like, there's so many opportunities to make money in life, and money is an infinite resource. Most people think of it as finite. The only thing that's finite for me is my time. I want to spend my time with people that I enjoy. The money will come. Like that's
And this is all mindset.
true. That's an entire shift. And the thing is, the less I think about money, the more of it I make. Because I'm actively putting things out into the world and I'm actively helping people in a way that presupposes value comes in return. Like it's the secret of life, the secret to living is giving. And when you give from a sense of wanting to help others, it automatically comes back in return. So in relation to connecting with people, I would always get really good at like the first 5 interactions with someone where it's like, we've hung out 5 times and then you get to this point and I'm like, oh, I think I know everything about this person, but really I've only just like skimmed the surface. And then I'd be like, all right, who's the next person? Who do I need to know? Who's this? Who's this? Who's this? And it's very like, we're tiptoeing on the water. We're not really going into the depths of the soul. And I've gotten better at that by going deeper with people quicker. So even if it still is 5 conversations, the conversations are much, much more significant than just very simple surface level. And I think that's because I've gotten to know myself better. So I'm willing to go deeper with others too. The second piece is that we can talk about systems too. And you know how much I love like tech and systems and automation and how much I track.
I know. That's why you're
everything.
like the exact opposite of me. I'm like feminine and ethereal, and I'm like out there, and you're like, you're spiritual, you're masculine, you're grounded, and you're very systems oriented.
I track everything all day at all times. And and we can go into some of the tracking stuff. But what I ended up doing is I created essentially a Google Sheet, which is like a simple spreadsheet that I called Powerful People. And anyone on that list, quantitatively rated them 0 to 10. And if they're a 7 or higher, I make it a note to touch base with them at least once a month. And it's even if for a simple phone call, even if for a simple conversation. If I'm in an Uber and I know I have a 30-minute drive, I'll go to that list. I'll find someone that I haven't talked to in the last month and I'll call them. I'll send them a message. hey, I'm thinking about you. And it's the little action that's an input. That's a little input that then pays dividends for the output you receive. Because what you're doing is you're saying, I value this person enough to remind myself to reach out to them because of who they are. And in doing so, that is received and recognized, and you're able to go deeper and deeper and deeper into a conversation with someone just because you're putting in the effort. And people ask, like, what is effort in a relationship? It's that. Like, what does someone else value that you can send them or do for them or make them aware of? And it's to take a slight tangent on that. I used to want to make everyone happy. I used to want to make everyone like me. And the pivot is that I still care if you like me or not. It still hurts if you don't. But I care much more about you being a better person because of interacting with me than me being your best friend. And if I can put myself in a position to help you improve, I've done my job. Whether you like me or not, give it a couple of years and you'll be able to reflect back and be like, fuck, Kevin like gave me the nudge I needed at that time.
Well, yeah. Do you find that sometimes when you're giving people like that tough love nudge, that is it like a fear response from the other person, that it's like, oh, I don't like this person because they give me tough love? It's like, that's not something we get from a lot of people, because we do have a society that, especially now, that's like, you can't offend anyone. You can't like ruffle any feathers. Everyone has to have the same opinion. So I know we've talked about human design a bit in the past. I'm a projector. So I basically plug into people. I can really see energy, and I can know things about people that just like, people are like, how the fuck do you know that? It's like, I can see it in your energy. And when you project that back to them, sometimes it comes as like unsolicited advice, and people don't really love that. So that's why I've said in the past, like, I'm not everyone's cup of tea, because like, I'm going to tell you those things that you need to hear, but you don't necessarily want to hear.
So there's two ways that I go about it. The first is, if someone's bringing something to me, I very simply ask them, do you want me to listen, respond, or advise? And then you can get, like, you gave me permission. If you say, give me your feedback, I want you to advise me on this. If you're like, just listen, cool. I'll shut the fuck up and I will listen to what you have to say. I might not like it, but I'm not going to say anything because you told me not to. On the second side of that, there are people that, like, if I know that I want to spend more time with you, like if I'm like, this person has a lot of potential and I would like to spend more time with this person, male or female, relational or not, I want to challenge them to be their best. I think the thing that I find most rewarding and almost the most attractive in a woman too is seeing someone operating at their peak. So seeing someone embodying what it means to be everything that they are. And you see this in musicians when they're soloing. You see this in surfers when they caught a sick wave. You see this in athletes when they're just like, everything's locked in, where you're so lost in the experience that you forget about time and space, and your body is just moving and flowing, and everything is working in synchronous movement. Those are the moments, and those are the things that I want to see people live in those states. Like, that is what I want. Like, you say, what's a peak performance coach? Like, I want you to be able to know exactly what the fuck that is and how to tap into it and live in that place, because that's the most fulfilling feeling. And that's the most fulfilling thing that I've ever gotten to experience, and to see other people tap into it is the most rewarding thing I've ever been able to help someone do. So yes, occasionally it's unsolicited advice, but I don't necessarily say it as advice. I frame it more as a question. So it plants a seed. So it's like, don't do this, do that. No, that's not really what I do. It's more of like, that's interesting. Why did you do it that way and not this way? And now you get a look into their mindset and why they think the way that they do. And I mean, if you lead in with a question, it's always them offering the response, not you. So it's never then an attacking or aggressive or condescending piece. But it does often get interpreted that way. But I'm okay with that.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you got to be the bad guy. You can't be everyone's hero.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's even a bad guy, because I think they'll look back and be like, he knew something I didn't know at that moment.
Yeah. So for somebody who is trying to shift their mindset, what would be the starting point for them?
Going back to the questions, the way that our mind operates is we ask ourselves questions. And all right, let me give you the answer to this, and then I have a side tangent that's really, really interesting. So, and this then goes into like the whole energetic piece too. So if you want to shift your mindset, you have to zoom out and look at things from a different perspective. The more times you do that, just like in the gym, the more reps you do, the more accustomed you get to looking at things through that different lens.
So wait, I'm going to stop you. Backing up even just from there. So somebody who's like not familiar with this concept or this work, how would they even get to that point where it's like looking at things through a different perspective or zooming out? Because I feel like when you're in the thick of whatever it is, it's kind of difficult to get there.
I'm going right down that path for you right here.
Perfect.
So what must happen is there must be a pause and a zoom out. The only way to do that is to ask yourself a question. So the question that I use is that if there was a blessing in this, what would it be? So you're presupposing that there is an answer, and you're presupposing that there is a blessing. So anytime that something's happening, if you say, and just have a reminder somewhere, put it on your phone, wear a bracelet, do something that reminds you of this, so that when something comes up, you can say, if there was a blessing in this, what would it be? Now, what your mind does is your mind is trying to find a solution. So your mind goes, what could be the blessing in this? And now it starts to find things that could be benefits to you, because your mind just gives you the answers that you ask it for. So the question is the way in. And it doesn't have to be that exact question, but the question is how our minds operate. Now, the fascinating piece is, if we ask ourselves a question, who are we asking the question to? Because if we had the answer, we wouldn't have the question. But because we don't have the answer, we ask a question to who or what, and where does the answer then come from? And this is the simplest way to look at that consciousness sits above our awareness, because we're asking a question to a universal energy that is greater than we will ever be, because we are tapped into it. Or I shouldn't say greater than we will ever be, because we are part of it. But it sits above us. And the problem is that most don't give themselves space to allow these questions to come through and quote unquote downloads to come through, because they must do. But the thing is, if you only do and you don't allow yourself to be, you can't become what you were meant to.
Yeah. And, I have a yoga teacher from like my first days of becoming a yoga teacher. And she would always say, like, one, if you don't spend time alone by yourself, like, who else is going to want to spend time alone with you? And the other thing she would always, which sounded so harsh. And at the time I was like, wow, she is a bitch. But it was one of those things that like, I came back like, oh no, wait, she had a little piece of knowledge that I didn't have yet. And she was right. That was the first thing she would always say. And now I lost it, but what was the last thing you said?
The second piece that she would say If you only do, you won't allow
Oh
yourself
yeah.
to
So,
be.
and we're human beings, not human doings. Like sometimes you just gotta be.
Mhm.
And some people see that as, a lot of people have said to me, Giana, just doing that is a luxury. And I don't see it that way. I see it, and again, being a projector, like I need to allow space for rest and allow space to hone my craft. Otherwise, I become a bitter, not nice human being. So to me, it's not a luxury, it's a necessity. Like I can't serve my community unless I am doing those things.
So there's two shifts in there for me that I can share that helped me personally. The first one being is that our society conditions us to think that in order to get more, we must do more.
Do more. Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, I believe that we were born perfect. Society convinces us that we're otherwise, and we spend our entire life getting back to that state that we were born. And
Yes.
if that's the case, then growth is a game of subtraction. It's a game of removing the labels and limits that we've placed upon ourselves that society told us of what we are. So in order to become more of what we already are, we need to be more of what we already are. And to do that, you need to remove all the labels and things. And you don't do that by doing, you do that by being what you already are. Number one. Number two is for a very long time, and I used to, when I played sports and thereafter, I would always get injured. I'd have like 18 months where I'm just on a hot streak, and then I would get injured. And it would be like, I have to like cool myself off or like pull me back down. And what I recognized is that on one side, part of my belief was that I grew up, my dad always said, it's always something. That was grew up in the 60s in New York. He's like, always something happening. But it was this predisposition to think that like, if things are going so well, like be careful for what's going to happen. So I worked through that. But the piece that was interesting to me was I felt that work in terms of like exercise and working hard was the requirement. Like I need to earn the right to rest. But the thing is, rest is how you continue to grow. So now it's I need to earn the right to work hard. So am I giving my body everything that I need? Am I recovering in the way that I need to? Am I sleeping the way that I need to? Am I fueling my body the way that I need to? Because if I am, my body can perform on levels that you don't even know that it's capable of. But if you're doing the opposite and making recovery a secondary thought, you're going to injure yourself. And that has happened time and again. Took me 28 years of my life to figure that out. But
That's not a
29,
long time in the grand scheme.
in the grand
of things.
scheme. Yeah. So it's been a shift, and now it's knowing the difference and not attaching shame to rest.
Yes, that's so important, and something that I too have had to learn, because like I can't operate that way. And like I was trying to operate as a generator because that's what society says. Like we need to do. And then once I learned human design, and it was like my whole, like the time that I chose to be born, like this physically doesn't work for me. And that's taken me 31 years, and I'm still kind of like learning how to balance the two. So I like the way that you reframed it, in that you have to earn the hard work, and the rest is something that you deserve. It's something that we all need. And fueling your body properly, even going back to the alcohol thing, like for me, taking the alcohol out, that was huge. And like the older I get, once I got into my 30s, like one sip of alcohol, I feel like crap for literally 3 days. And it's like knowing how to take care of the body. I've been teaching aerial yoga and yoga a lot lately, like a lot more than I used to. I took a big break from teaching in general for like 3 years almost. And now I'm getting back into my groove, and I realize that it's coming from a much more grounded place. Like my teaching has just exploded. I like feel better when I'm teaching because I am allowing those moments for rest. Where when I first became a yoga teacher, I was teaching like 18 classes a week. That's like so crazy. It's so unsustainable. And now, even, you know, if I teach like for 5 weeks, I pick up a couple extra classes, like I make sure to take a week off. And
Smart.
that's something that's like, it was an uncomfortable change for me, but it's made all the difference. And now I can show up more fully and be a better teacher.
Smart. Yeah. It's the shift from feeling the requirement to do rather than the requirement to be.
Yeah. And like, again, I mean, there's been a lot of reframes for me, you know, like when I first came into the spiritual world, the teaching world, it was like, oh, teachers, spiritual teachers don't make any money. And that was coming from a scarcity mindset. And I had to really look at, okay, hundreds of years ago, spiritual teachers, they were taken care of by the community. It wasn't necessarily a monetary exchange, but there was an exchange of goods or services or whatever it was. That person was taken care of, housing, food, whatever. So now in our society, bartering is less of a thing. So it is a financial exchange. And I had to even become okay with that. And that took a really long time. And it's something that I'm still kind of grappling with, because even, you know, when I first started on this journey, my family is very Italian protective. We're very close. And everyone was like, oh, Giana's lost it. She's fucking crazy. Like, this is never going to work. And it was their way of like protecting me or wanting, or like their attempt to protect me, when really like they were just shitting on my hopes and dreams, like creating these patterns for me. But coming away from that, it's like in the last year and even in like the last 4 months, there's been such a big shift, even with like coming on here with the podcast. Like before it was very sporadic and whenever I kind of felt like it. And I've gotten to a place now where it's consistent and I want to put it out there. So it's cool. And actually working with you has been a huge inspiration for me, and seeing the obstacle that you went through in 2020, and you can talk a little bit about this. But your business was predominantly retreat based. And then the pandemic happened and you had to pivot. And there's two things that I want you to talk about here. Is one, like, did you allow that time to kind of like grieve what was happening? Like, do you allow a time to like be upset, yell, like punch a punching bag, like whatever your thing is? Or do you just like, have you just gotten to this flow state where it's like, okay, mindset shift automatically?
Yeah. So pre-pandemic we were all international retreats. So we were doing 6 to 8 retreats per year, and that's all I did. So when 2020 happened, I was on the last flight out of Australia and I came back to the States, and there was no travel upcoming. So I had to cancel, I believe it was 4 or 6 retreats the remainder of that year. And my initial thought was not, what am I going to do? It was, looks like I got a vacation for a little bit. Like that was literally my first thought was, okay, cool. Looks like I'm going to take a vacation. I will be honest, the first 2 months, 3 months of that, I just partied for the most of it. Like,
I know, because things were very different here in Arizona.
Yeah, I went back to old habits and old patterns, and I was like, that's the only thing I can do. So like, cool. And it wasn't, that was right at the end of those 3 months was when that fitness challenge started up. And that was a big pivot for me. Because I began to focus on myself, and I think, honestly, I think 2020 was one of the best things that could have ever happened to me. What was interesting was that in my mind, I go, okay, there's got to be a lot of other people who are in the same boat as me. If so, if I can figure out a solution to this, if I can get resourceful and figure out how to work through this, I can help other people do the same. And that's exactly what I did. I initially created a course, a program to help people with in-person offerings transition them online. And then that expanded into what was the mindful method, which was how to make, market, monetize online coaches, courses and communities. That then led into me getting contracted to do some larger consulting gigs for small to medium-sized businesses. And that's then led into me partnering with other companies now. That's then led into me running another company. That's then led into me being the CTO of another company. And it's just been like, in hindsight, you're like, oh yeah, it's exactly how it was supposed to work out. But looking forward, it was never like, it was just, okay, this isn't going to work. What will? And that was like, I attribute a lot of my success to curiosity, because it's never been a hard, fast no. It's a, oh, that won't work. Okay, what can we do? And it's just like allowing myself to roll with the punches and not get upset by them, and sit down, figure out what can work, and then do the work. I think that's the biggest piece, is so many people have ideas, but they never put any action in towards them. They say like, this is a great idea. I would love, here's my vision of this. Okay, what have you done for it? Well, nothing. I'm not ready yet. Okay, well, great. You'll never be ready. So good fucking luck. So I've never allowed myself to say that. I've always just been of like in college. And I think this is kind of just who I am as a person too. In college, I bought a camera because I wanted to learn photography. I didn't have a clue about photography. Well, I bought a camera, I played with it for 2 days, and then I told people that I was a headshot photographer. I sold out 28 slots for headshot photography while I was in college, after I had just bought a camera 2 weeks prior. And whoever, like the people who were like 21 through 28 got incredible headshots, because I learned throughout the process of taking them. And I scaled prices too. I wasn't charging absurd amounts at the beginning, but then I got hired to do videography for 2 ASU clubs. I got hired to do all these different things. So the shift in the belief in me is that I don't need to know to start. I just need to start, and I will learn along the way. And that's the biggest thing I can give to anyone who wants to do or start or become their own thing. You're not going to have all the answers. No one does. No one knows what the fuck they're doing. They only know what, like, honestly.
No, I know, it's so true.
Look at Elon. Elon has 6 multi-billion-dollar companies. He has averaged a multi-billion-dollar company every 5 years for the last 3 decades. Does he have a clue what he's doing in space? Absolutely not. But is he trying and failing and iterating as quickly as humanly possible? Yes. He just does it on a scale much bigger than anyone can possibly imagine, because he's allowing himself to think much bigger.
So what's funny, he's come up the last like 3 podcast episodes. And I also think he's a very good example of this, because, you know, on the previous podcast to this one, we were talking about how like we've gotten really comfortable as a society with just accepting the status quo and the way things are, to the point where we're actually like starting to slide backwards. And something that Ilana said, this is obviously not a direct quote, but like a summarization of what he said, like if we don't start to push the envelope and fail, like we're going to slide backwards. We're going to come into like, it's going to be like the Middle Ages versus like going into a more futuristic, better world. And I think that he is really forging the way to be like, okay, yes, like we have to start shifting our perspective and like doing things a little bit differently than just accepting the status quo.
100%. And it's allowing yourself to think outside the box. And this is one of the reasons that I don't set goals. I only set targets, because if I accomplish everything in my life that I set out to, I will have failed my imagination.
That's a perfect spot to end it on. Yes, I completely agree with that.
And it's allowing yourself to think bigger. And when you allow yourself to think bigger, the problems that seem massive right now are actually just little tiny blips in the ocean. It's like a wave in this massive ocean. that is propelling you towards what ultimately you're meant to do.
So lastly, this is what I pretty much ask everyone, because this podcast is for people who are just seeking. So a lot of people who are just discovering the connection to body, mind, and spirit. So I always ask, what is the best piece of advice that you've ever received, and to give it to the listeners? And you've had, like, there's been so many golden nuggets in this episode.
It's not your job to prove to people. It's not your job to prove to people that it's possible. It's your job to make the impossible probable.
You're definitely doing that.
It's a variation. I think I paraphrased it there, but it's a variation of that, where it's not your job to show people, because like there's a reason that you have the vision that you have and someone else doesn't. Because if you have the ability to dream it, you have the ability to achieve it. So it's not your job to convince other people that your vision is valid. It's your job to prove to them that what they believe is impossible is actually possible.
Yes. And I always say, like, it's our responsibility. Like, you have this magic and everyone has this unique magic to share. And it's like your responsibility to share it with the world.
1000%.
Thank you so much for coming on. This has been an enlightening conversation.
Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you all for listening. This has been an amazing episode. If you've enjoyed it, if you're watching on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up, like, subscribe, share, do all those fun things. And I will talk to you all next week.